You are listening to Radiant Creators, a collaborative project composed of people whose passion, purpose, and dedication requires forging their own unique path of empowerment and livelihood. A radiant creator isn't making a living, they are living.
Okay, let's get started. So, welcome to Radiant Creators. It's really great to have you on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is Jake and Mari from thegrandsolarminimum.com. So today we wanted to get maybe a 101, a tutorial on what exactly is the Grand Solar Minimum. We've done a couple shows on it recently, and something I like about your YouTube channel is that you guys are not sensationalists at all. You're very down to earth, and you just tell people what's going on. You do a great, fairly regular report on space weather, Earth weather, what's going on, and that's all people really need is just the news, what's happening, and they can go from there. So I couldn't think of anybody better who people could follow, who don't want to be terrified, and also people who, a YouTube channel that people could follow that truly, when you go through some of your older, videos that you've created, are great Grand Solar Minimum 101s. So that was my hope, is we could talk about, well, your journey, both of you. How did you come to be doing this work, because it's very unique, very challenging. It's not a popular opinion, and the passion that keeps you going, and also, of course, GSM 101. So let's start with, who are you guys, and how did you come to start this venture?
Well, Mari and I, we started on YouTube, always had an interest in science, and, we noticed in real life that we saw atmospheric changes, and you could see it with your own eyes, some unique cloud formations that we hadn't seen before in our lifetime, and just started paying more attention to the sky around the same time, and the sun halos, stuff like that were starting to pop up regularly. And so some of us educated ourselves, and it led us basically to what's happening with our channel, which is Grand Solar Minimum. But believe it or not, there were some things that we did along the way. We helped people understand the difference between a lens flare and Planet X. That was one of our steps along the journey. But that information that we were witnessing with our own eyes, and then you saw this community of people who talked about Planet X, it piqued my interest at first. But thanks to Mari, she is what I consider. Hey,
that's the dog.
That's the dog jumping in. But no, thanks to Mari, her channel was around science fiction, comedy, and she did a lot of, I guess you could say, debunking of what's a lens flare and what's this and what's an artifact and blah blah blah. So between her opening my eyes about lens flares, and also a gentleman who, let's just call him Lee, who started communications with me, began talking to me and explaining to me these things that we were seeing in the atmosphere, the increased precipitation. He started educating me about cosmic rays. And between the two of them, Mari and this person, Lee, it really put everything together for me. And thankfully, I've always had a passion for weather. So this was an easy transition for me. And the one thing that I realized is that everything that we've talked about from that point on has been nothing but actual scientific facts. So I'm kind of a geek for weather. It's been my passion all my life. And Mari, I would say your passion has always been...
I'm a geek for just space and sky stuff. And, when I met Jake, I was debunking Planet X, Nibiru, lens flares, that kind of stuff, cataclysms. There's a lot of fear-mongering on YouTube and sensationalism, so I was pretty passionate back in the day of debunking things. And when Lee and Jake were talking about Grand Solar Minimum, I sort of sat on the fence as a skeptic, and I remained pretty non-biased on the whole topic, and I was like, I'm not sure. And what I did was I got my head in lots of scientific research. I read all of like Valentina Zarkova's work and various other people that show these natural cycles are just that, natural, and they happen. And what's interesting with the papers is they all correlate with each other. As you start studying and getting into these scientific papers, which are not easy to get through, you'll find that they correlate together and the timelines are similar, where in 20 to 30 years we are going to have some very extreme climatic changes and people will not be ready for it. So what better time than now to start discussing it and really get people on board to thinking and changing their mentality of life as we know it when it comes to everything, power, food, supplies, all that. That's sort of, now I'm on board 100%, but I was definitely a skeptic back in the day. Hey?
It took some time convincing for sure for her, and I get it. And like you said at the beginning of the program, it's an uphill battle because the consensus 97% say that we're warming, but with the recent research that we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years, it's proving otherwise. And I think it's important that the American people get the truth about this. And a lot of folks confuse GSM with ice age and stuff like that. Well, it does. When they talk about maunder minimum being the mini ice age, it's a metaphor for ice age conditions, but for just this period of time. So grand solar minimums don't really cause ice ages, but they can mimic temperatures from that period. And with everything that's happening right now on cycles, what I've seen is that grand solar minimum, the Milankovitch cycle, all of these really intense cooling cycles are all lining up together right now, which has a lot of people concerned about super grand solar minimum. But that's we're still sifting through all that information too as well.
And it seems like the grand solar minimums happen every 400 to 600 years or so. If you could break down the, I guess, smaller cycles, like if we could start at like the 11-year sun cycles and such, and then how that relates to the warming and cooling and the grand solar minimum that we believe that we're moving into, because it really is something. I need to actually find or make eventually a chart that shows there are the 12,000 year cataclysmic cycles that some, those appear to happen. But then within those, it breaks down to 11 year to 100 year to 400 to 600 years. There's these amazing huge seasons that it is an uphill battle, as you say, to convince people, because we think about winter, summer. We don't realize that that there's just huge cycles huge seasons that humans just don't see because we don't live very long.
Right.
So yeah, if we could break down the cycles that add up to a grand solar minimum.
So as far as the grand solar minimum cycles, we get them every 200 years or so. Some of them are stronger and some of them are weaker. And when you look at the comparisons between, like, say, for instance, the Dalton minimum and the Maunder minimum being back in the 1600s, the Dalton minimum more closer to the 1800s, we didn't get that deep cooling. We still experienced grand solar minimum effects, but it wasn't as deep as it was in the Maunder minimum. But when you talk about regular solar cycles and then the grand solar minimum, so one thing that I've learned since I've been doing this, and again, we report on what's happening. We report it as it comes out. We have a lot of people who help us in the scenes to dissect the information. TSM Solar Observations in the UK, he does a great job of really assisting with my understanding on everything. But so how we understand this works, you have your 11-year cycles, okay? And one thing I've learned with these 11-year cycles, 11 to 12 years, is that cooling doesn't happen overnight. And it's more of a decadal operation. So this makes sense to me when we talk about solar minimums and solar maximums happening every 11 years. So these 11-year cycles, we will experience a solar minimum, which will give us a period of time of low solar activity, lower sunspot counts, more coronal holes because the chromosphere is weaker, the magnetic field is weaker, therefore we'll see more uptick in solar wind. And stuff like this is normal in the minimums. Having a large sunspot here and there is not uncommon. If you compare a sun when it's in its maximum, you'll look at the disk and it's lit up everywhere. And a minimum, every once in a while, it's possible to have that one large sunspot, but that doesn't mean the minimum's over. But I'm getting a little off topic. So you have your minimums, and then you go into your maximum once again in the middle of the cycle, where sunspot counts are up and back to sort of normal, and then we start to decline into the next minimum, which usually transfers into the next solar cycle. Right now we are in the end of solar cycle 24 as we speak, and some are saying that we are going to see the beginning of solar cycle 25 in late 2019 into 2020. So what do we know about these last two solar cycles, or at least this last one that we've pulled out of? Because there's a lot of information that's being used as consensus, but in other words, I'm seeing it different. In fact, this year, NASA came out with a report saying that solar cycle 25 had experienced 24 had experienced one of its weakest solar cycles in over 150 years. So we see the previous solar cycles before that in 23 and 24, and we can see a trend where we are getting weaker and weaker with solar activity. And so with that being said, if you follow the trend now, solar cycle 25 has always been, in my opinion, labeled as the unknown. Predictions right now of sunspot counts being slightly above what we just saw in 24. But we have to understand that 24 was, I believe, around the 142 peak mark, and I think we're supposed to be closer somewhere in the 200s. So if we're slightly above what we got in solar cycle 24, that doesn't make a drastic improvement where it's reversing anything. In fact, it's just basically telling us that it could be just as neutral as a prediction as what we had in 24 going into 25, and then lowering as some are predicting solar cycle 26 being the mark of the grand solar minimum. I've even seen predictions of solar cycle 27 being the official start, which would be sometime in the mid 2040s. But so that's your difference. You got your 11-year cycles that happen all the time, but the thing that's different about these solar cycles is the strength of them, and or how weak they are. Obviously, the weaker they are, the more space weather influences our Earth's climate, and the stronger they are, we see more resistance to cosmic rays and all that stuff. So not all of these cycles are repeating exactly the same, and each grand minimum is different. But some of the information that I think a lot of folks are getting right now are concerned that we might see a grand solar minimum that returns us to modern minimum conditions. Or deeper.
I mean, no one knows.
And solar cycles, so we have the 11-year cycles, then a solar cycle, like 24 and 25. How long are those?
Those are 11 years.
11 years, okay.
So you have a maximum and a minimum. You got the minimum and then the maximum on the cycle, and then we start to decline to the next minimum, which begins the next cycle. So that's how they're numbered. Solar cycle 24, that's an 11, 12-year cycle. Solar cycle 25 is the same thing. So and then and usually it does appear to happen every 200 or so years where we get that grand solar minimum where we just flatline on sunspot counts for a period of time. And some are predicting this upcoming grand solar minimum to see 0 sunspots for quite some time. Something that could be space age records.
And it is amazing how when you look at history, because the book I'm reading right now, Life, Death, Rhythms of Ancient Empires. And, I've only started, haven't gotten through too far yet, but in looking at it, and it's got some charts in it and such, but it's amazing how literally empires have come and gone based on solar maximums and solar minimums. And when you just look at the solar cycles, and you mentioned like the modern minimum, and before then, I got them written down here somewhere in my notes. But
Yeah, forgive me for I don't have them all memorized, but I know I'm aware of the
I don't
wolf.
either,
We got
but...
the spore minimum, the wolf minimum, but the monitor sticks out the most because of how much famine we had. And what concerns us the most, and we're starting to see signs of some really sudden declining, what did we call it, solar activity happening in the near future. And if we had a hard time feeding millions of people back then, imagine what we're going to do with 7.2 or 7.5 billion people on Earth if we start experiencing crop loss and food shortages and price hikes. I mean, how long do we have before food securities are in jeopardy? And I think that's something that everybody's still trying to figure out. I know there's so many channels that cover this topic, and everybody does a pretty good job. You got Ben Davidson. He's more the scientific of all this. David Dubine, Adapt 2030. He's information on headlines that don't get reported. He knows his growing stuff and where to grow.
Historicals.
Yep, historicals. Ice Age Farmer is also another guy that preps for growing. And then you got Oppenheimer Ranch Project, where if you need a little flair with your GSM information, that's where you go. So, I mean, everybody does a good job at relaying the message to each person. And I still think we're trying to figure out just how quickly we're going to rush into these conditions, or is this going to be hopefully a soft landing where we get some time to really prepare for this and have things already in motion and not be caught with our pants around our ankles when it does happen?
Exactly, because here at Radiant Creators, I think our essential message is to interview inspiring people to inspire others. But truth is inspiring, and survival is inspiring, and what's going on right now with the Grand Solar Minimum is so essential to your life, to your future, and we can, as David Dubine says, Adapt 2030, we can thrive through the Grand Solar Minimum. And really all of humanity could if they just knew about it. And I know it's kind of conspiratorial, of course, but it does seem that with the global warming nonsense that's being pushed, and that world governments, even though some like China, they seem to be planning for it. It looks like it, at least. But it seems like a lot of the world governments are trying to maximize the damage that this does. And I know that's more of a cynical view, but I don't see, I get accused of being cynical, but I really am just going off what I see as evidence. I mean, I don't think anybody really buys the global warming nonsense who's studied it much. It's almost like the problem is if you studied it all, if you put any effort into learning more about, say, global warming, you're going to realize it's silly. So most people who are pushing it or believe in it either have an agenda or haven't looked into it at all. And so do you feel like we're being set up for failure? Like it's really up to us to take care of ourselves, take care of our families, our communities, our fellowship. I mean, this is something that networks of people internationally will know about and be ready for, and we're just doing our best to help more people be aware of it.
You interviewed a guest too, Scott Chapman, and he has a very nice presentation. We're actually going to have him on our show on Saturday this week, and we're going to give him the platform. We want this presentation out there. And the one thing I like about Scott, we're like-minded as well. We're building at our website, thegrandsolarminimum.com, just basically a treasure trove of information about what's going on now and the previous, but that takes a lot of time. So we're still building that website, but Scott has a pretty good presentation put together that gives you the basic fundamentals from the starting point to the end, and with ideas on what we're going to do and adapt. So stuff like this, I think the importance of discussing it in layman's terms too, and I look at our channel as we're more of a layman's terms. There's a lot of scientific evidence out there, and a lot of it, your average listener may not understand it, or it might intimidate them. So I believe it's important to have these guides in place, because there's so much information overload about what happens during grand solar minimums and solar cycles. Right now, what we're experiencing, and this is just my opinion, I'm not saying it's so, but we're in the beginning part of heading into a grand solar minimum. I believe it's going to happen in the next cycle, but we're seeing conditions that we're going to frequently see once we do head in the grand solar minimum. So I'm saying we are still declining to that. But at the same time, I'm also saying that there's still a lot of unknowns about solar cycle 25. Mari, did you want to add anything about?
Well, I mean, when it comes to presenting this to the public, I do believe that the government does hold information back, and it is going to be fend for yourself. So, the best ready is going to be good to go with this. But when it comes to presenting the information, someone entry level that's never heard of the grand solar minimum, it is very overwhelming to even accept it. A lot of people have cognitive dissonance where they just have been raised or conditioned to have a certain understanding, like we're warming and cataclysm's going to start. But when you actually dig into the details, and that's the tricky part about what our channel does, is dissecting the different cycles. It's not just a solar cycle. There's all different types of cycles.
Well, before I forget, we were talking this morning about Greenland's glaciers melting, where back in 2012 we saw a 4-day warming event. It drastically thawed out the ice. And so alarmists all over that support this global warming theory, we're telling you so much ice melted in Greenland, it's catastrophic. We can't believe, But if you actually look at a study that was done, and actually I saw this morning, where this happened during the warming phase of a North Atlantic oscillation. Well, now we're in the cooling phase, and guess what? We've actually dramatically increased the amount of ice that was lost during the warming phase of this oscillation. Now we're in the cooling phase, but the media didn't want to tell you that the reason why they lost so much ice was because that was the warming phase at that time. Now we're in a cooling phase. So it's things like that, when the ice sheet broke off also, right before this. That's something that happens according to ice core data every 150 years. So the last time this was known to happen was 1889, right about on time and on schedule. So the main reason I think for this channel, for Grand Solar Minimum, our channel in particular, is that we want to be clear that you're only being told half of the story. You're not getting the full story. You're not getting the big picture, so to speak.
There's many pieces to the puzzle, and assembling that, you can't go into this topic of climate change thinking that you're going to be able to latch onto one thing and hold on to it and that's your answer. There's too many other variables, and that's the tricky part of predicting the future of what's going on, because there is no one profession or specialist that can deal with this. It takes professions from all different science. You need people in astronomy, solar physics, you need people who specialize in the ocean oscillations and jet streams and the magnetosphere. It's so complex, and once you start dissecting that as just an average viewer, it gets overwhelming. You're like, wow, this is like way over my head. It's hard to understand. So that's the challenging part of our channel. We try to dissect that into bits and pieces of information that people can understand.
Well,
so when they hear cosmic rays, they're like, what's that? And it's slowly but surely throughout each show we have explanations, and hopefully it'll spread the word. People start sort of paying attention and understanding exactly what's going on, that there is more to it than just meets the eye.
What we want to do is just simplify things. And you mentioned our earlier recordings, which we're starting to get back to that content. We're doing a daily solar update where we give you the solar wind speed. Well, why is that relevant? Well, solar wind speeds, it's also, not only does it determine the speed of cosmic rays, highly charged particles that bombard our atmosphere, but also we believe it also has the effects on the jet stream. So if you have a low solar wind hitting the Earth, the jet stream is going to be more loose and wavy. Where if you have high solar winds, it's going to be a little tighter, it's going to be a little stronger. So we give the solar wind speed every day, the KP indice, which is deals with, we believe, volcanic and seismic activity. That has a big factor in it. Once you hit a certain level, you'll have geomagnetic storms. We share a daily count of sunspots, TSI. Those we feel like are the most important things to watch as we decline into the grand solar minimum. So there's so much more to the grand solar minimum. Our channel really, if we had the time, if this was something we could do full time, I think you would see a bigger aspect, because we really only cover 30 to 40% of what's
hard.
really going on with just, and even when we do mention the topics that we don't always cover, there's still so, I think Scott best said it, we undersell things, like, just because there's so much to cover on it. And we're still learning, as long as some of our followers as well.
And you mentioned TSI. Can you give a brief description of what TSI is? Because I guess I'm used to calling them space weather reports. Let's call them grand solar minimum reports or something like that. Your daily news. I think that's great, and it's great the way you present it. And since I'm sure you'll be mentioning TSI in it, just give us a brief description of what I think that's total irradiance.
Total solar irradiance.
Yes.
Guys like Ben do a great job at really getting detailed. The way I can describe to you is TSI is the output of the sun, what it's putting out. And the reason why we want to follow it is because it takes so little to make a difference. And we want people to see that as we go through these cycles and these years through, because this takes a long time. This is not something overnight. So we want to show people by observing TSI, yes, it's dropping, but it takes time to drop to that rate that we're looking for. Now, when you start seeing TSI readings, the 1358 point whatever, that's where you know that we are starting to see that shift once more output is becoming apparent, that we're declining in total solar radiance, which is the output of the sun. So in a nutshell, TSI is what the sun puts out, and the reason we cover it is to show everybody that it is on the way down, and just how far are we going to be able to witness this. Because what's key about what we do on our channel is, we also know the dangers of having a weak magnetosphere and the dangers of solar flares. I mean, let's think about the Harrington event. If we had the electrical grid back then that we have now, you're talking trillions of dollars in damage and almost a full decade before everything comes back to where it was.
Yeah. And the Harrington event, can you describe that a bit?
That was a solar flare that hit our magnetosphere, our magnetic field, and affected, at the time, we weren't really set up for any kind of electrical. So anything like telegraphs, I mean, there were actually reports of people working the telegraph machines were getting shocked because of this sudden burst of a solar flare. And these things can happen. Carrington. I said Harrington. I was thinking... I had
close enough.
Harrington event. That was when Joey Harrington of the Detroit Lions threw an interception in the last part of the game.
I don't mean to correct, but
I'm glad.
Sorry.
And this is why I have her by my side.
Well, many would see those two events as equally important, so it's okay.
The sidekick.
She's the producer.
Sidekick?
She's the producer. She builds the website. She puts the YouTube channel content together. So, I mean...
I do the geekery in the background for our channel. That's what I like to say. I'm the geekery in the background. The
Carrington event was definitely an intense situation where just, again, that solar flare wreaked havoc on telegraphs, communications. Solar storms that we get now are minor. We're talking minor ham radio communications outages during a G1, a G2. You might have some severe stuff if we had like G4s and G5s, but... right now in the solar minimums, we really haven't seen anything stronger. It's been a while. G3, G4?
Probably the most action we've seen is that one solar flare in August. Like, what was it?
Back in 2017, the X-class flare, yeah.
The most exciting thing. It's been sort of...
But I believe the X-class flare that hit during the Carrington event was rather large. Like, I want to say it was like it was in the double digits. It was way stronger than the X-class flare that we witnessed 2 years ago. So are those things possible right now? Absolutely. We follow a lot of work of John Casey, and he talks about how between 2017 through the 2030s and into the 2040s, we're going to see an uptick in seismic activity. We're going to see an uptick in volcanic activity. We're going to get a V7 or higher, I believe, between now and...
He's concerned about the new Madrid, I don't know, fault line. You know, how developed that is around there, how catastrophic that would be now if something were to hit at that fault line. That's John Casey's big message in his latest book, Upheaval.
Well, and Upheaval's great.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Still, I've read it. I have to go back through it. You know, there's so much to absorb, but I have to go back through it. And a lot of the things that he wrote in his book, it comes together. And I'll add to the whole earthquake situation. You know, this is why this is crazy to me. Everything just ties together. You know, you have your cosmic ray and fluctuation where it sees our clouds, cloud nucleation, more moisture. We're getting more floods. The ground is saturating. It's putting more pressure on the plates. Uptick in earthquakes. We've already had a few weird earthquakes here in the U.S. and spots that aren't used to it. And I have to believe that these minimum conditions are contributing to these earthquakes in these weird spots because we're getting a lot of flood water. We're getting a lot of moisture. And we are actually seeing the increase of earthquakes too as well this year so far. I know the last 3 years it's been going up, but 2019 has stayed pretty steady.
And it's great to be in touch with Earth and space weather. And one thing I would just recommend to people is, although an aspect of it may be dire, it's really, really fun to learn such things because if you noticed, everybody, when they used to watch the evening news, I think our parents probably watched it more than we do. I think it's declining over time. But you always were interested in the weatherman or the weather lady. You were like, oh, there's these high thing, and H is coming, and there's an L over here, and they're going to, when they touch, for some reason, something happens. And it was really fun. And so I think this is just a expanded version of that because... like for instance, if you have, Suspicious Observers has one that works really well, but I know there are others. They call it their disaster preparedness or prediction app. Yep. But it's great to have an app on your phone that lets you know when there's earthquakes around the world. Absolutely. Because you start getting in tune with it. You start realizing, like most people don't know that earthquakes happen every day, just about. And when you start seeing it on your phone, then you start to be able to sense trends, or it makes you just think about it. You go, oh, there was an earthquake. Yeah, there was an earthquake here. Like there was an earthquake in Arizona and Nevada, I think it was yesterday. And they were in uncommon places. And so we were thinking about it. And so then you start to look at the space weather. And for instance, John Casey in Upheaval talks about your cosmic rays can or do basically affect earthquakes, and that's a real concern. And so then you start looking at, what's the space weather doing? What do our cosmic rays look like? So it's just a grander, more full way of looking at the health of the planet. I think it's fun. I mean, maybe we're aware of possible dire things, but at the same time, your life's a lot more fun. You're a lot more in touch with your planet and what's going on. So I mean, your reports on what's going on. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on. Is that very matter of fact, and they're very, very helpful, and they help people start to be aware of a broader perspective as to what their planet is doing. And so solar minimums, they happen every. So I just wanted to just be clear about there's solar minimums and there's grand solar minimums. Yep. Is that how it goes? So solar minimums happen every 200 years. Nope. But then
solar minimums happen every 11 to 12 years for the solar minimums, and then you have your grand solar minimum that happens every 200 or so years.
Every 200 or so years, and then where we've had extreme minimums, larger cycles, like the Maunder minimum. That was like 1650 to 1700. Then your Dalton minimum, that was in the early 1800s. And so when we talk about the grand solar minimum coming, we're looking at a possible prolonged, Earth being cold, Earth being cool. And that creates a lot of issues. And in what you're reporting, especially like in your daily reports that are almost daily, let's say, we're seeing signs of that. So what do you believe that you're seeing recently? And I guess there's a lot that we could, point to. But what is giving you, when you're looking at the Earth weather, space weather, what is giving you the inclination to think that we are entering a grand solar minimum? I mean, because you're putting out info, you're helping people learn about this. So it seems like it's coming. It's like, what's giving you the, as it's been said, people used to plant by the signs. What are the signs that you're following that are leading you to believe that this is around the corner, this is getting close?
Well, it's the precipitation, and it's known that precipitation has a cooling effect on saturated ground. So when you tie in the things that we cover that's most important with this science of this, the cosmic rays, you talk about cloud coverage is increased. You talk about more precipitation. You see record floods everywhere in the world. We're talking about 10 inches of rain in 4 hours.
Snow in Saudi Arabia. Lakes in the Sahara Desert. Death Valley actually has a minor lake right now. When you talk about all of the upticks, like, Kilauea volcano, that was actually kind of mild compared to what happened in 69 through 74, I believe. They had a much longer eruption. But the main thing I see is the flooding worldwide, and the crop situation gets worse each year. And with the crop situation getting worse, now this year alone, I've talked about this earlier, people said I was nuts, but it's happening. And with all the flooding that we've had in the heartland in Nebraska, which is our third largest corn producer in the United States, okay, you got South Dakota underwater, Iowa's underwater, parts of Minnesota are severely flooded because of all the snow melt. Mm-hmm. And now we're seeing increase in fuel pricing because we're looking at less ethanol being produced. They're preparing for this huge part of their corn industry being reduced. And already, I think the national average of gas prices is up in the 280s right now. We're paying almost $2.90 in upstate New York right now, and that's up from last summer, which we were comfortably around the 230s last summer. But last summer, I mean, we're at the very beginning of spring, and we're seeing records for rainfall, annual rainfall records being broke in a month. And that's concerning if this continues, this saturation. So those are the signs I'm seeing. Like when you read stories. The other day, I read one 2 weeks ago. Hundreds of telephone poles were collapsing everywhere. Well, that's because of the high winds and saturated soil. We haven't seen this kind of moisture before. So our infrastructure is failing right before our eyes because we've never experienced this stuff before. Not in our lifetime, not in our generations. So thankfully with technology today, social media, we get to see it more every day. We see it in other places that we've never seen it before. So you have to take that factor into effect as well. Like you can't say, oh, it's happening more often. No, we can report on it. But when you see the same thing everywhere, we've also...
And it's not just one area. It's like, okay, now this is happening on a more accelerated scale now.
We've been covering it for over 3 years now, and we have seen... we're covering these flood events more often. We're covering these crop failures more often. I mean, farmers cannot plant this year. They've lost a whole year of production from what happened in the Midwest just a couple weeks ago. And if you look at the weather, you did a weather report a couple days ago, it's storm after storm after storm after storm. So they're just getting saturated. They're not able to even dry out. And you couple that with prior hurricanes, say like how the Carolinas got hit,
Georgia,
our potato fields took a hit back there. It takes
and then you go overseas, time. Look at Mozambique. In 8 weeks they've had 2 major cyclones, and it
takes years for a farm to recover from an event like that. I know the Carolinas, it said about 5 years for that, like some of the potato farms to actually reestablish themselves.
It was the pecan farms in Georgia. 7 years before a tree can produce pecans. So
hail events.
Yeah, well, you're talking about the hurricane that ripped through and uprooted all the trees. I mean, they have to replant the entire orchard.
Peach orchard.
Peach orchard, yep.
Pegged with like hail too, got destroyed, right? Not
Yep.
long ago.
So, I mean, we've seen it now over the last 3 years. The person that first started our interest on this told us this was going to happen. That's the thing. He told us this was going to happen. And each year, slowly but surely, we've seen an increase of these events. We've seen an increase of cosmic rays. We've seen an increase of volcano, seismic. This year, we shattered records of snowfall across the northern hemisphere. The ice came back stronger than ever. And, you know, even just 3-year period, still not enough to really convince people. We have to see this over an entire decade to be honest about it, honestly. I mean, you can't just point your finger at these recent 3 years, but everything is happening like it's been said it's going to happen, and it's continuing that trend. So I think those are the major signs for Mari and I. And also, when you look at CO2 readings, still at 412 parts per million right now, and our global temperatures have decreased from the UAH, have decreased from 2016, 0.52 degrees Celsius above baseline. So instead of warming, we were at 402 parts per million in 2016. We've increased to 412. Our temperature has actually dropped a half degree Celsius globally. So this CO2 theory is not working anymore, in my opinion. We're seeing CO2 level rise and temperatures falling. And really what it comes down to, when you have lack of total solar irradiance, lack of solar activity, cloud coverage not getting that energy to your oceans, the heat escapes and the oceans begin to cool, which then creates the climate on this planet. And again, it's natural. It's just going through a natural phase right now. We happen to be alive during the part where it's beginning to cool. And fortunately, we're not going to be around to see how bad it gets. And like I said in the beginning of this broadcast, this takes time. This takes many decades. But we have to think about our kids and their children and their futures down the road, because like you said, we're looking at a very long, prolonged period in this next minimum, which is being deemed, or hopefully being deemed, the Eddy minimum. Some are saying it could be 80 years. Some are predicting it's going to be 400 years. Some are saying we could even see 1,000 years of zero sunspots. So that is just off the charts as far as expectations for solar activity. But that is going to be a long way down the road as well. So, but we're going through it now. It's starting now.
And that's the trick, is that we'll have to be the media that helps everybody figure it out. Because if you can expect it, then that changes, well, how you live and what you do. So, yeah, because I don't see, at least the powers that be, as of this moment, pushing anything other than it's getting warmer. And we can see, it seems like they're very aware of what's truly happening because they know what to censor. I've been amazed at, if you look at, the more you study space weather, I'll call it that, space and Earth weather, the more you see stories and you look at the real data, which is available. I mean, the satellites are there. You can see the data, log in and check it out. With that said, we're just looking at charts and graphs. We're looking at something which is very predictable. From the presentation, that Scott Chapman did, I have a little chart here, which just shows the sunspot observations over time and the different minimums. And sometimes past cycles do not necessarily predict the future.
Right.
Like I'm a trader by I guess profession right now, and I can say I wish past patterns predicted the future, but they don't necessarily. Although when it comes to something which is organic, like the weather and like space weather, I am pretty sure that we're moving into summer, and I'm pretty sure there'll be winter after that. Yep. And there's certain predictability when it comes to organic patterns, like the Fibonacci sequence and such. So the grand solar minimum and solar cycles, same as if you go way out to 12,000 years, the cataclysmic, magnetic pole reversals, which are quite disturbing.
Yeah.
These are just cycles that we know of historically. We know these happen. So that's my hope, is to get the general consensus of people, of humanity, just to look at charts and graphs. Just look and say, look, here's history, and here's empires that have come and gone based on these cycles. Like, why isn't Rome there anymore? Well, Rome easily formed because it was warm.
Yep.
Rome's real issues were, well, plague and the fact that it got cold. That's really what took out Rome. It was the weather.
And what's really sobering about what you just said is that just look at it. And the thing is, there's people out there that don't want to look at that. They don't want to look at the information that's been provided. They don't call it real science. They call it, fudge numbers, or this is make believe. But it's so typical of, it's almost become a cult. Like, we're really divided. You have Democrats and Republicans. You've got global warming and global cooling, and it's becoming that diverse now. It's that right down the middle. There's no happy medium anymore. That's the unfortunate part. But when you talk to someone who believes in CO2 warming theory, and you tell them, can you explain how in the medieval warming times, where we had, according to ice core data, we were at 270 parts per million CO2, and we were at a warm climate, the warmest the planet has ever seen. So my first question is, who was driving Al Gore's SUV back then to make the climate so warm? Secondly, why was it so warm back then, and now we're struggling to rival any kind of climate like that, and the CO2 is way higher than it was back in the medieval warm period time. And it's like, once you show them that they don't want to, they'll say it's not reliable data because it's coming from, a scientific method like an ice core or a tree sediment or something like that. Well, look, then you don't believe in science. And so you either have people who don't believe in science or people who just don't want to look because it goes against their agenda.
But we need more people that sort of tread in the middle, because even some of the scientific outlets that are collecting the data have some, suspect ways of collecting data. Look at NOAA. You have to look at the data with a certain kind of perspective and be objective to make these decisions. I mean, you can go into how NOAA.
You mentioned NOAA.
He's banned on NOAA.
Yeah, NOAA doesn't
Facebook
like me.
profile.
But NOAA does a lot of their record recording temperatures at airports and runways. Their sensors are right there on the tarmac. So what happens all day is you have the sun beating up the asphalt, and there's these weather stations that are right next to the very extreme warm temperatures of the asphalt from the sun. Plus, you got jet exhaust that's beating up on this. I mean, we've got some high temperatures going on here just from factors that they're not happening naturally. This is being assisted because of the environment that these sensors are in. So, who do you trust? Do you trust your empirical data, your stuff that you can look at scientifically, you can see it, you can test it, you can analyze it, or do you trust in the current technology of the readings of the satellites, which, we saw a very interesting paper about how people are criticizing the UAH satellite temperatures that we follow at drroyspencer.com, actually. And his information is actually on point. His readings, their work, him and John Christie, did show that a 15-year period of a warming of 0.18. So they're not hiding anything over there at UAH. These other satellite readings, which one satellite can't even give you an accurate reading unless it's a clear day, okay, these other three are a lot higher. They're at the 0.24 range above baseline warming in the last 15. So you see, we're talking about 6.06 degrees separation, but there's more accuracy, there's more consistency with the UAH, and really the other three, RSS, the European one, I can't remember the last one, the air system, they all kind of take the lead. They follow what the RSS does and just kind of modify it from there. So the UAH is obviously, it's right there in front of your face. It's the most truest form of global temperature readings every month. And in fact, Wednesday is my Super Bowl every month. I anxiously await the numbers every month because we like to report. We follow that every month. That's something we do every first of the month. We like to show how it's dropped and how it's rose. Right now, it's staying pretty neutral. It hasn't really dropped much. If it's gone up, it's maybe up maybe 0.02. If it's gone down, same thing, 0.01. So we're in a stage where we're staying in the same degree. We're not warming or cooling right now. We've kind of hit a pause before we start dropping, I'm assuming, by next winter, especially here in the northern hemisphere for next year. Australia is seeing some record cold right now, some record snow right now. So these are the things we have to watch down there, because that's what's coming for 2019 and 2020.
We got some weird reports worldwide about people saying the predicted forecast temperatures are 4 or 5 degrees below
all year long,
actually
and,
all year
and
long.
2018.
Yeah, we get that all the time, and it makes you wonder what exactly is going on. And it's so important to really do your own research and be as objective as possible. You really have to stay zoomed out, because when you deal with this kind of Earth systems, there's so many complex systems to try to understand, and no one's really a professional in any of them. I mean, you don't have one person that understands everything, how they integrate and work together. We're observing them all and seeing how they connect and seeing how the puzzle sort of fits together.
And that leads me to, when I was telling Mari about this earlier, that's why we can appreciate what you're doing, is that you've taken a piece of the GSM community and talked to these guys and find out what's making these guys tick. And each one of these guys, they offer something to the community that's part of the same message that we're all trying to get out there. Some are more expertise. I watched Oppenheimer Ranch videos where he's inserting a queen bee into a beehive, and he shows step by step how it works. That's fascinating. The alarming headlines that Adapt 2030 gives that doesn't get talked about in the headlines. Christian's very knowledgeable about growing and adapting vertical growth. He showed us, he's the one that introduced us to moringa and aquaponics. And then, of course, you have, who am I skipping? Ben Davidson, I already said, he's the most scientific of all of us.
He's the most technical,
yep.
About
I think,
everything.
anyway. I mean, everybody, I think those presenters I just mentioned, they all have a very high knowledge of the science as well. I just think that everybody plays their role in this community, and it's something for everyone to absorb. It's not just centered to one particular person. These guys have a way, and me and you've talked about this before too, and I think talking to you as well before helped me understand that, you know what, this is a community. The message is the same. Some people are different, and that's okay, but we have to get the message out, because this is no more talky talk, in other words. It's time to act.
And we have a lot of prepper channels that are jumping on board, a lot of gardening channels that want to cover urban gardening or natural health, that kind of stuff, medicinal things like that. So it's a very interesting community to be a part of, because the topics are just so broad, but it all sort of circles.
They're strong-minded subscribers, all of them. I mean, every channel they follow, they're sharp, they're strong-minded, and they're also assisting. They provide evidence, they provide charts, they provide links to papers. So, YouTube is this is where we really got everything started. YouTube's funny, though, because you've got your unnecessary stuff that's just, wow, that's popular. But then you go to a topic like what we're covering and how uphill it is, but how interactive our community, the subscribers are. They chip in with their information, their ideas, and it's only to help. There's not really a strong sign of people trying to take each other down. This is all a community that really is interested and wants to help, and we know the people that follow these channels are probably going to be the ones that are going to be leaders in communities on when it comes to if we do lose grid, what do we do? Well, Charlie down the street, he's a pretty good prepper, and he followed this information. He knows what's up. That's going to be great that we've got people like this. Look, we're talking thousands of people follow us, all right? Hundreds of thousands maybe for the whole entire group. That's not enough. But at least we have a sprinkle of somebody across the globe that has the knowledge and can spread it. Hopefully, if things do go bad, there's still a way for people to learn about what to expect next and what's going to happen. There's no need to panic. We have to adapt. And, brilliant, Adapt 2030 as far as the channel names, because that's the key to this global cooling situation with crop failure. This is all about adapting, learning how to grow indoors, vertically, aquaponics, whatever. This is going to be an adapt. I don't think there is a home run shot for where to move to avoid any kind of climate problems. You have to adapt.
I think it opens up a line of discussion is to be prepared for anything and try to go into it with a positive attitude. You prepare for the worst but hope for the best. And the fact is the majority of society is not prepared, and they're not in that mindset, okay, lights out. You know, even if it's a storm that's, you know, gone by and you're without power for a week, can you do it? Is your family going to be comfortable? Do you have the means to keep life ticking over? Even just something simple, being out of power for a week. How are you going to keep your food? Do you know how to, you know, get water? That kind of stuff. Basic survival skills, society en masse has pretty much forgotten. There's only a small portion, like percentage, that have, you know, embraced it and kept it going generation. You know, people are so used to walking into Walmart and being like, oh, here's my food, there's my bottled water, here's, you know, all my batteries, and everything is great. You know, what else do I need?
My cheesy poofs. You know, you're not going to be eating cheesy poofs if we head into conditions like some people are expecting. Especially, I mean, it could be as soon as 3 to 5 years. It could be in the next 10 years. But I'm concerned. I don't know about you, but I've seen produce in grocery stores that look pretty puny.
Most of the produce is horrific.
Yeah, you can definitely see it's in many cases challenged for sure. Yeah, and you mentioned cheesy poofs, and like, well, yeah, you won't be able to get cheesy poofs, or if you can, they'll cost a lot more. And then, of course, you get into the issue of your health. So, you know, you won't be healthy, and you won't have any cheesy poofs. And it's funny how I think of it as domestication, and it's funny how domesticated humans have become in many ways, because I do believe there's probably a good number of people who think that water comes in bottles. It's naturally occurring in plastic bottles. Yeah. Because did you know that there's wells and that there's springs? Have you ever seen a river? I mean, there's plenty of humans who eat cow but have never seen one in person. So we are very removed. And one thing about, you know, preparation for such things, preparation for a grand solar minimum, or really preparations for a great big unexpected solar flare or anything, the way to prepare really seems to be just to live a better life, to really live the way that everyone, I would say, used to live and should be living. I mean, like in the modern minimum, you know, 1650, 1700, that was a different life. I would imagine most people had a garden. Most people had a well. You know, cities probably had some level of self-sufficiency if they were sieged or something like that.
Yeah.
Just acknowledging what they're consuming. Society doesn't do that. Well, we are so wasteful, especially in this country. It's alarming how wasteful we are. There was a certain consciousness back in the day of you don't waste things, you save things, you preserve things. People don't know how to can these days, you know, preserve. What if you don't have a refrigerator? How do you store your food? That kind of stuff.
You talked about health, and I think the cure for things like diabetes would be a grand solar minimum, where you have to grow your own food. Because think about it. I mean, if you're not putting cheesy poofs in your body, if you're not drinking soda that has sugar in it, you're eating more vegetables. You're probably eating less red meat because it's going to be harder to obtain. I mean, I'm talking about situations where you're off the grid and you have to fend for yourself, and that's a very likely situation. And in things like that, like you said, we'll be forced to go back to what made society a good society in the first place, because we were doing things for ourselves and we worked hard for that and appreciated it more as well. We take everything for granted right now, I believe, including ourselves. I mean, we catch ourselves all the time taking certain things for granted. And even covering this topic, I think, though, it makes us, it's more sobering, covering what we cover. And I think it transfers back to our household now, where we don't consume as much and we don't waste as much, because I'm cherishing, you know, you say it's the better life you live. That's better if we are. The unfortunate disagreement that I had with someone in the earlier days of this, you know, he didn't believe that. I had told him one day that I was going to go catch a live training camp of Cleveland Browns. I'm a Browns fan. I drove to Cleveland, and I was going to enjoy a few days of some, football, watch some training camp. And he lectured me about this, that I'm wasting my time, that all this is going to happen and this ain't going to matter. And, maybe you're right. Maybe in 12 years we'll be starving and, NFL is just a thing of the past. But I'm not going to spend my last days preparing, living scared or paranoid or alarming people. I want to continue to prep. But at the same time, if that's the case, let's cherish this. Let's cherish what we can right now, because there might be a day where we don't have these conveniences, and it's going to take some time to get that back. So I like your message of living a better life, making sure that you're mentally healthy and physically healthy as well. But look, we can't go into total freak out mode right now. I mean, yeah, it's bad. Climate's getting worse. The disinformation about why it's happening is getting worse. It's getting harder to communicate to folks when you have a YouTube channel that talks about global cooling, but YouTube throws an ad underneath of your video that tells you you're global warming. So, it's so difficult with the censorship. And Mari and I, we've experienced a lot of censorship. The amount of subscribers we have compared to the views that we get. And we get these spurts where it's tens of thousands of views, and then we get these spurts where it feels like we're being buried.
Oh, well, I just did that video on Texas, the infrastructure failure and the flooding, all those cars underwater at that airport. I mean, that didn't get out there.
Nope.
I feel like it got released, it got a bunch of views, and then within an hour it was like shut down.
Yeah,
no one watched
first
it,
hour or
which is
two, we get
unusual.
really good returns as far as like how many people are actually watching it. But then if you look at the 24-hour data, our views just flatline out. And it's like, how does that happen? We start off so strong, 1,000 an hour, and then whoop, nothing. So we're fighting censorship, and I know the other channels are as well.
Well,
I mean,
it's weird.
that's a
YouTube
very
YouTube has a filter, and I find sometimes when we don't put anything analytically in our videos, they do better because they're skirting. They're not hitting a filter saying, don't show these guys. Because it's just generic, empty description. I
want to tell you really quick about our Al Gore story before I forget.
God.
Oh, go ahead for sure. Yeah.
So every time we quote unquote troll Mr. Gore, our channel gets harassed by higher power ups, and I'm talking copyright takedown attempts.
We get that, and our internet gets cut off.
Internet every time. And the last time that it happened to us, we were making fun. Al Gore had a 24-hour event on climate change, and he was going to have bands play and everything. So we pretended that we were showing live bands from this event, and what they were really terrible cover bands performing songs that were not even close to the actual version of it. Just having a little laugh. Well, next thing you know, after the show, an hour later, we get a notification from BMI, who owns the rights of Pink Floyd's music, that we either take it down, or they will take it down, or they'll take the money that we made for the video. So I start to do a little research. Sure enough, there are photos all over the internet with Al Gore and the president CEO of BMI together.
Got Tipper
so,
and parental advisory.
They're
all intermingled.
Be careful if you want to criticize Al Gore. You will get messed with. They'll try to take your channel down. They'll give you a headache and a copyright strike. And I've never seen anything like it in my life. It's only when, I'll keep it light so it doesn't happen to your channel.
Yeah, we get demonetized and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and that's very challenging because, and well, you guys know, since of course you have a very active YouTube channel, and it is difficult when you get messed with because, so far none of us are rich yet doing this. Hey, sure, maybe we get a little revenue from things, and like Radiant Creators makes a little money, but it doesn't pay the rent. I'll tell you that. And it's not our primary source of income, but we do believe in the message, and we want to get it out there, and we interview a lot of different people on a lot of different topics. And our channel, I just feel, even though we interview eccentric people and a lot of diverse topics, we've gotten messed with a few times too. And it's just utterly frustrating because, as you know, you put so much effort into it. Ultimately, time is money. You know, life is money. You're putting so much time, effort, money, sweat off your brow into getting the videos out. And then you know something's not right. You know, I won't mention the particular interview we did just to, you know, I just won't. But it was somebody that we interviewed. It's out there. And like ever since then, the trend that we were moving on has not continued in the same way. It's like just one interview we did that I think I'll call it Empire didn't like kind of screwed over Radiant Creators Forever a little bit. It's like you can just, we don't get the traffic that we used to. And it's something but we're going to keep at it, and we keep at it on other platforms. We're on BitChute too, and that does quite well, but not as good as YouTube. And it's really something when you'll see a video, let's say, that goes viral, a lot of people are watching it, and you'll watch the views, they're going up and up and up, and then you keep checking back on it, and somehow the views are going down. Yeah. And you realize that the censorship is very selective.
Yes.
And I don't even think it's that algorithmically based. I think that they've got call centers full of people who are just watching specific things because, you know, there's another YouTuber out there who has a stalker. You might know who I'm talking about. There's a YouTuber. He's into the space weather also, and has a very active stalker threatening his life on YouTube, and he doesn't even get a strike. They don't go after this guy threatening somebody's life, saying, I'm going to
listen. Every YouTuber, I mean it, every YouTuber that makes consistent content, they have a stalker. And that's the unfortunate. This guy here, he's my stalker. But no, seriously. Hello, Waylon. You want to say something about the grand solar minimum, buddy? Yes, I have a parrot dog. No, but every YouTube, and probably for reasons like this, you get stalkers. But every YouTube channel, I know channels out there that get death threat emails. Their family gets contacted. Their jobs get contacted. I mean, you know, that happened to me. I work full time for a living, so. We've had arson threats. We've had guys. I had one guy, and it's gun threats. We had
on our street with videos streamed live on our
making
street.
videos of being on our street and waving, you know, gun signs and stuff. So I mean, YouTube is very unsafe at times, and that's what concerns us. Like you said, no matter what happens, they don't get struck down. They don't get. You could remove the channel over and over again, but that stalker is just going to create a new channel. And continue with, and I think Mari and I, in the beginning of the Grand Solar Minimum journey for us, we were still being trolled very heavily in the beginning. And I think in the beginning, there was key people out there who were trying to play us against other Grand Solar Minimum channels and other channels against us. And, you know, we were still kind of passionate about what we'd just been through in our experience. So I think the one thing we've learned about YouTube is that you really yield caution on who you work with and who you associate yourself with and who you talk to, because sometimes you've already said it can affect the way things happen for you from here on out. And so Mari and I, we try to keep to ourselves. We let people do their thing. We do our thing from time to time. We'll do interviews like with you, like Scott's coming on our channel on Saturday, and Mari has a special interview coming up this summer with Valentina Zarkova to speak with us more about the Super Grand Solar Minimum. Right now, her work is still being submitted in the peer review process,
it's under embargo.
She's not allowed to talk about the specifics. That's why there were certain slides that were blurred out during her presentation, is because they're not allowed. People will steal her work, basically, if she presented these slides. So she's protecting herself right now. Once it's through the peer review process, it's going to be there for everyone. There's going to be tons of people that's going to want to talk to her.
That's something. Well, to touch back on a couple of things that you mentioned, seeds. So in the middle of the country, you've got farming has definitely been devastated. And for a short time, I was an organic farmer. And one thing I learned about farming is Some people are lucky and this is not the case, but for the most part, you go into debt the beginning of the year, the growth season, buying seeds. Seeds are horrifically expensive. And I know that saving our seeds is important, but when you're farming, when you start getting into the notion of farming acres, it gets very hard to do that. Saving seeds is not quite as easy as it sounds.
Right.
Believe it or not, some farmers are strictly seed farmers, and they're harvesting seeds, not the plants and the fruits. So it's a lot of work. And I've done both. I've been a seed farmer too. But you go into debt and then you make money, and then you pay back your debt, and then you make money. Well, the thing is, there's a lot of farmers that are just, I can only imagine, even though I think most of it's big ag business out there, but even in that case, you go into the year so in debt, and you're really depending on making money. And it's a lot of work because, sure, you can grow, but of course you have to find buyers. There's so much to it, and I can only imagine the numbers of bankruptcies, of just disaster, because I don't know how many farmers, even large ones, can make it through a bad year. And then if there's two, I don't know.
Well, and that's just
it would devastate the farming industry.
They're saying people in Nebraska, 50% of the farmers aren't expected to come back at all. So you're talking about 50% of the farming industry in that state not coming back. Well, who's going to pick up that slack?
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody I guess could come and buy those farms, but farming's a difficult business. It's not.
It's decreasing.
Yeah.
Less people are getting involved with that too, and that's another thing we have to that's another concern. Not just weather, but people are losing interest in farming and agriculture because our government doesn't do enough for our farmers right now. And people are still waiting for 2018 payments. And I read a few weeks ago that the damage that's happened with the destroyed grain out there in Nebraska and Iowa, there's nothing that they can do with it. They can't even recycle it. And the government doesn't cut. There's something kind of loophole in government legislation that will not reimburse these farmers for lost grain. I mean, if I'm a person who's looking into agriculture and I know there's policies like that in place, I'm not farming in the United States anyway. You have to have some kind of you have to have some kind of support. And the American government should take care of its people. And I'm not trying to get political. That's the one thing I only disagree with. I'm pretty on board with what's happening everywhere else right now as far as politics go. I think we're headed in the right direction as a country. But I still think we need to do more for our farmers. Our infrastructure definitely needs improvement. You talk about the Green New Deal, where this fantasy of getting rid of engines in 12 years and banning cows and redoing the infrastructure and rebuilding with green technology. Well, hey, that sounds great. Who's paying for it, first of all? And is it gonna give you the results you think it's gonna give you? Because I've always told people on my channel, I believe in clean air and clean drinking water. Okay, so I'm all for new carbon capture technology. I'm all for keeping our air clean. I'm not about burning fossil fuels irresponsibly. I want to keep that in perspective. But if we're taxing people because we think it's going to save us from climate change, that's the part of it that I really disagree with. And everybody is on board with that reason alone. Let's take down the pollution because it's going to save us from dying from climate change. Where we should be communicating, let's make better breathing air and drinking water. But instead we're scaring the public on facts that were thought were relevant. They're now appearing to be lies.
I just think that tax money should go into not reducing carbon so much as reinvesting into the farming infrastructure, because big ag has taken over, which is really dangerous. Back in the day, you could, rely on a handful of local farmers. And now, where are the local farmers? Where are the small town local farmers to be able to supplement these communities? You just have this big ag that gets trucked in from all over. What happens when those supply chains shut down locally to these areas that no longer
Prices
have
go
farms? Up. It's that mindset, that mentality that everyone everywhere needs to start thinking about. How can I change that in my community? Is it something that we can start talking about? Is it something I can start? You have to start with the individual, who then reaches out on a local level, and then this is nothing someone can just combat as a worldwide solution. It's everyone in every area needs to start small and local and have an impact on their community.
Yep.
Oh, definitely. And it does exist and it is happening, but it's not where it needs to be. And I know that, I mean, the ideal is you kind of have a small homestead and you can grow and such like that. But I do realize that's not possible for many people. But you know, humans are incredibly ingenuitive, and starting with one's own sovereignty, there's no reason not to grow microgreens. They're super easy. You can do hydroponics in your home, and it makes your kitchen a lot more interesting, and it's really fun. And that's when I think about it goes back to living a better life, and then like we don't quite have the space we need for everything we want to do,
right?
But we got family and friends in the area that have some space, and you go over and you say, while you're having a glass of wine, while you're socializing, do you ever think about, you have a large backyard. Have you ever thought about chickens?
Right. No, great, and that's an icebreaker. That's great. I mean, you don't even have to push the idea of the grand solar minimum. Just the idea of being self-sustained, it could be bigger than you think down the road. And another thing you can look at too, if you have a family, if you have children, grow together. Teach your kids. This is a family activity that you can get your kids out of the house, get them off the electronics, get them outside doing something that's good for them and knowledgeable for them in the future. Because really, what's going to happen here in the next couple decades, it's going to impact our children and their children more than it is going to be me and you.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny, there's a Jamaican saying, I don't remember how it goes, but somebody I knew from Jamaica said that one of the ideals in their community was that you do your best to fix yourself so your children don't have to fix themselves.
That's right.
That, you know what I mean? That what you fix in yourself, ultimately you're the problem, then your children don't have it.
That's right.
So it's cleansing your generation rather than passing it on to the next, So one thing I wanted to touch on, if we still have time, I know we're a little over an hour, but cosmic rays. I guess ultimately they come from stars, and they come from our stars, and our star, the sun, but they come from stars in general. So cosmic rays are out there, and they come to us. And they go, I believe, right through the planet,
yep.
Or some do and some do not.
These are highly charged particles that go right to the core of our planet, and they heat it up, and that's why scientists believe the volcano activity and the seismic activity is because the increased charged particles reaching the core and heating things up from within. Yes.
Yeah, and being aware of these things, we can think about a grand solar minimum, but you become so much more aware of your planet and its health and what it's doing. And so, yeah, John Casey in the book Upheaval, where he talks about cosmic rays and a grand solar minimum affecting earthquakes, of course. So we are getting to the point, and if one watches Ben's channel, Suspicious Observers, the disaster prediction app, I mean, I do believe he's working towards maybe mastering predicting earthquakes, and there's other people who are doing that too. Yeah. And you hear that, well, that's impossible, but it does appear that when we get this broader perspective and understand our universe and our planet and how it works, you begin to be able to. So I guess I'd ask, with John Casey's work and the idea of there being a really large earthquake along the West Coast, I mean, do you feel that the grand solar minimum and ultimately cosmic rays, etc., are possibly leading us to that event?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said, the weaker magnetosphere allows more cosmic rays in our atmosphere, and the weaker the sun gets, the weaker our magnetosphere gets, which is allowing more cosmic rays to enter our atmosphere and charge up our core. So absolutely 100%.
Well, his big concern was the new Madrid fault line that runs, right down the Midwest, right?
Yep.
So
yeah, not just California.
The problem with that is it's not very seismic right now as a zone. You get some weird earthquakes here and there, but it's that infrastructure, those houses, the population around that seismic area is not prepared for this cyclical kind of natural cycle that we're headed for. And he was so passionate about that before his stroke. God bless his soul. I hope he is healing. We've reached out to him, and I hope to hear back from him. I'm going to reach out to him again.
His focus right now is his health. And, that is the most important thing in his life, is his family and his health. And we've just respected that with John. I think a lot of people would love to hear from him, but at the same time, going through what he went through and his family history, it really opened his eyes and changed perspective. I think John has done more than enough to get the research going, to get the credibility of this topic going. John is a big key factor on why. John's the main reason why we're here. His information is what said, you know what, this grand solar minimum stuff is real. This is solid stuff, and this guy's done the work. And then from there, we found people like Hendrix Finnmark and Valentina Zarkova and Zarkova. Jasper Kirksey, right? Jake. Jasper Kirksey. I mean, there's just so many people that have just it's spawned off from, and the more research that comes out that supports this evidence, the louder the drumbeat is getting.
Well, and it's interesting because each specialist in their topic is covering something different,
and it's a piece.
Yeah, it leads to the same
conclusion.
Yep. It's fascinating. So it's definitely a lot of work reading into it and trying to follow it and connect the dots, but it's well worth it if you want to have that awareness of what is going on.
And so basically, to answer your question, John's based his predictions on what he knows is happening, which is the increase of cosmic rays charging up our core and heating things up. So he's basing his predictions on just that fact alone. So the belief is cosmic rays inflection, heating the core up. That's what's causing volcanoes, earthquakes. And with Ben, I'll add with that, I got to be honest with you, I'm not an earthquake predictor. I have, on a minor scale, called a couple here and there, not specific regions and zones, but because of watching Suspicious Observers, his methods teaching people on how to call these, I believe they work. I know some people. There's another guy out there, Dutch Sense. He does, I guess, good work. I haven't watched him, so I can't say.
I think his channel got taken down on YouTube.
Yeah, and a lot of people are upset about that because they felt like that he was doing an accurate job as well at predicting earthquakes. And there is another sign of, if you get too close to the truth, we're going to cut you off. And he must have hit a really sensitive nerve to be removed from YouTube the way he was.
Yeah, a lot of credibility happened right there where they censored him.
USGS, I believe.
Yeah, fighting with USGS. So.
Yeah, it's so strange that he got taken offline because I don't know, a lot of question marks there. I hope he reemerges somewhere or the other because, yeah, it's funny. You realize you just push that slightly wrong button, broach that slight topic you shouldn't, and it's extraordinary. And you begin to see it. Dutch Sense. I mean, I don't get it. What did he ever do wrong? And now his channel's down. It doesn't make any sense.
I think it comes down to the obsessed stalker situation, too. I mean, there's people out there who really know how to get things done through false flagging and stuff like that, reporting channels, false accusations.
Gang stalking.
I believe that some of these, all this is really handled by YouTube bots that I don't think a human actually reviews the content. I think it somehow picks up on certain algorithms and like that. We've challenged a bunch of things in the past where we were accused of copyright information, and it wasn't a copyright, but no matter what we did or said, nothing changed, even though we provided evidence that it was our material, that we did it with fair use. Still nothing was overturned. So unfortunately, that's when you think that this is just censorship.
Well, I got a video taken down on my other channel for cyberbullying and harassment, and all I was doing was discussing how I was being cyberbullied and harassed.
We got violated. We were sharing our awful story.
For explaining.
Yep, we got a copyright strike for talking about our experience. So
it's just how, this automation works with these YouTube bots. I think it's just not very reliable.
Yeah, definitely there's some automation happening. And then I also think that there's I know it's so conspiratorial, but I really think there are call centers full of people somewhere that one day we'll find out about. They get
Could be.
given, watch this, you watch this, and you do this, and they're just watching.
Make sure they don't get too much information.
Sometimes you got to wonder if that really is happening, because there's so many things that get caught. You have to have.
My Palu videos, almost every single one of them either got taken down or demonetized. And that was pretty catastrophic. Not many people. There was no news outlets really reporting that. Really, was there?
I made like a statement about the Palu situation as it happened on our channel. It was spur of the moment. I just wanted to announce on our channel that, hey, you guys need to check out Palu right now, tsunami, and it got 90,000 views in 24 hours. So we were like, whoa, but YouTube shut the
magnifying glass on us, and they took down almost every video about Palu. They either demonetized or restricted the content so it wouldn't get any more views.
That was the first time we experienced that.
We went from 90,000 views to like nothing. They cut everything off. They're just like, we don't want this.
Just an example of restricting information, though. I mean, they didn't want that.
Are you guys mirroring your content anywhere else? Are you on like BitChute or any other video platform?
Not yet. We have several accounts
everywhere, but it's just a time thing. We've moved twice in the past year, and we finally are somewhat settled, you'd say, after moving last week. So I'll have more time. I work on the website. I really want to sort of funnel everything through our website, thegrandsolarminimum.com. Haven't had a chance to do that with the move. And then I have all kinds of accounts on like Gab and Minds and different other platforms we're trying to build up, but it's not a very big following, because I mean, how many different social media platforms are out there? It's tough to manage all of them and keep on top of everything. It takes time, and we both have
it definitely does.
Jobs and kids and sports with the kids, so it's very time challenging to get it all done. But I think we'll have more video outlets. We are on Twitch, but we don't have we don't have a strong presence. Let's put it that way. Yeah, it's just not.
Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, because we mirror everything on. So we're on YouTube, then we also do BitChute, and I tried other things. But the nice thing about BitChute, it is free, and they don't censor yet, and they are easy. It's almost like a more basic YouTube. It just takes things a little bit longer to upload, but YouTube's quicker. So I find that I get the YouTube and the BitChute uploading at the same time. And it's just that it is difficult because you're tending to social media platforms that basically have no traffic. It's like Minds. Minds is great. We interview.
Uh-oh. They got to him. What happened? Did we overload his computer? They're like, don't talk about Minds. I wonder if his audience can hear us. Do you have the link?
I think so.
Let me see.
Gotta load live.
I could probably call him back. Wait. Nope. Is that us, no internet connection, or him, no internet connection?
Oh, yeah, it's us. Something happened to our internet.
Wait. Okay,
there you go.
Don't talk about alternative social media.
Yeah, don't talk about Minds. That's a hot button. Well, it's odd. It is very out there, but sometimes I do wonder about such things. It was funny when I was talking to David Dubine. It was the crappiest connection I've ever had, and I know there was a continent gap, but we do international interviews all the time, and it tends to, the continent hops are not really the problem. It's if you have good internet connection and they have good internet connection, the global hop is not really the issue. And so it was weird. It was almost like there was some strange forces that were fighting us. And so weird things happen. Well, I wanted to just close things up. I don't want to keep you too long, but one thing about Upheaval, that book and that notion of cosmic rays affecting earthquakes and such, there is everybody's favorite nightmare reading, the Adam and Eve story by Chan Thomas, which is about, magnetic pole reversal. And it does appear, thankfully, that as we've learned more since that was written, that if there was a magnetic pole reversal, it's not, well, it certainly ain't fun, and your chances of survival are very slim, but it's not as bad as the Adam and Eve story. But one thing I really liked about that book was his reinterpretation of Genesis 1, 2, and 3 as really interesting historical recordings of when we've had cataclysms. But something that I think the crux of that whole book for me, the big meaning that I walked away from was Eve knew. Ultimately, our intuition knew. Our intuition knows. So when it comes to upheaval in John Casey and the possible big earthquake on the West Coast, I lived on the West Coast twice for a good number of years, and something always bugged me. I just would look out at the ocean and thought, man, there's like something really dumb about living here. This is just not a good idea, and I know better. And I finally I don't live there anymore. Now I'm in Arizona. I live on Mars with cactus.
Yeah.
And the idea of there being water, like you mentioned in Death Valley, anybody who thinks that's not weird, you've got to go to Death Valley. Yeah. It sucks. Yeah. I mean, the idea of water or even life of any kind in that desert is remarkable. Right. So, yeah, well, I guess we should wrap up. I mean, it's been great talking to you. Do you guys have any last thoughts as we, check out before they knock us off again?
Yeah, no, just thank you for having us on to help spread the message. I hope our listeners understand what our channel is about a little bit more. Check us out on YouTube and go to thegrandsolarminimum.com. We're on Twitter, Facebook. But other than that, we really appreciate the time to talk to your audience and ours as well about what's happening.
Oh, and thanks so much. Yeah, and definitely one of our goals with this kind of series of interviews that we're doing is to get the Grand Solar Minimum crowd communicating more. There's slight bit of infighting and such like that, sure. But I feel like we're all at like level 101 of knowledge. And the way we get to 102 is when there's more of a Shakespearean brawl. People start to hang out and talk about things and such, because one great example of that is, I think, something everybody should check out, and I'll link to it in the show notes, is the Cloud Mystery documentary by Svensmark, The Cloud Mystery. The idea that the more cosmic rays we have, the more clouds we have. When the sun starts to go into a minimum and you have less cosmic rays, you have less clouds, and that's not so good. The idea of how cosmic rays and clouds affect our climate. These guys were just very honest scientists, and they proved their theory, and they've been getting their ass kicked ever since. And so that's something that I think in our own community we really want to do, is just, there's no reason for that. So hopefully we can get the community to be more of a community, especially the content creators who are doing a lot of research, and we can go from level 101 to 102.
Right.
That's our endeavor. Well, Thanks for being on the show.
No problem.
And I'll stop recording now. Thanks for listening to Radiant Creators. Check out more content at radiantcreators.com. If you like the show, give it a like. Share this. Comment. Keep the conversation going. You can also find us at alternatecurrentradio.com, where there's this show and a lot more.